Welcome back to Rolling Through Negotiations. Guess what? This is episode 91 and we've got an amazing guest. This episode's with Leigh Hobson. Lindsey's a leadership development trainer. She's a speaker. She's a consultant. She does a lot of coaching. She's also a LinkedIn top voice for mentoring and she's a professional speaker. This week in the podcast, we speak about some really powerful principles to do with leadership, to do with mentoring. We also go into some pretty deep concepts like what is self-awareness really, and how can understanding yourself help you and those that you're leading in achieving the outcomes that you're negotiating on. How do you find your purpose? These are the kinds of things we're speaking about today, because if you understand where you're coming from, you understand who you are, what you're about, that's really going to help in your negotiations. But how does this all work? This is what we have, Lindsey. You're going to love this episode. Before we begin, before we introduce you to Lindsey, I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of these lands. Let's pay our respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. And I'd also like to acknowledge the Kaurna peoples whose lands we're recording this episode from. Let's roll. So, Lindsey, it's fantastic to have you here on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited for this conversation.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think that we can really hear some wisdom about is when it comes to mentoring, right? So the question is, how do you see mentoring programs and leadership as a way of negotiating a better future for everyone?
I love that question. Mentoring is such an important part because we can always learn from someone who's been there and done that, so to speak. And that is definitely the difference between mentoring and coaching. With coaching, the value and the gold is even in the coachee, whereas with mentoring, the gold and what they have to share is often in the mentor. And that in itself, we pride ourselves so often in society with what we can do and what we can give. And we look at what we can share with others that will outlive us as well. And mentoring is just a really small opportunity for us to be able to do that through the lens of business outcomes and through the lens of personal outcomes too, because you don't just have to do mentoring in a business setting as well. The thing I really want to point out with mentoring, though, in helping us to negotiate better outcomes is we have a set idea sometimes of what it has to look like. And the flip side of that is we have no idea of what it's supposed to look like. There's actually a nice happy medium. And so if you're feeling like when you're looking for a mentor, they have to have certain experience, like for example, industry experience, or have to do something, tick certain boxes for you. We do hear that a lot. But what I would love to say to you is when you're searching for a mentor, look for someone who has achieved what you want to achieve in life, no matter where they've done that, because it is so almost irrelevant if they have industry experience, for example, or experience in the same country as you. It's so irrelevant in so many ways. You're looking to learn from someone who's got the same skill set as you're looking to grow. And that in itself, you can adapt that. They say the person with the most behavioral flexibility is always the one who has the most success. And so you can adapt those skills and apply them to your life and use those skills to negotiate a future that you're incredibly proud of as well.
And so you said something so powerful at the very beginning. You were speaking about the gold in mentoring and coaching, and I think you were saying something like the gold in mentoring, the gold is in the mentor, or and then in coaching, the gold is in the coach. What does that mean? Can you explain that a bit more?
Yes. So in my everyday world, there's a big question mark around what's the difference between coaching and what's the difference between mentoring. It's a conversation I have a lot, and it's a conversation that perhaps you listening at home are thinking of, how do I know if I want a coach or a mentor? A coach is typically someone who has a skill set which will allow you to come to the realizations and uncover the information that you have in yourself, so the gold or the value you have in yourself, and help and support you to turn that into the outcomes you want to achieve. Whereas a mentor is someone who has either that experience or that skill set themselves that they can impart on you to achieve what it is you want to achieve. And that's a really important difference. It's almost the key, because if you choose a mentor when you needed a coach, you will perhaps not get the results that you're looking for, and vice versa.
Thinking of the book by Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist.
Oh, yes.
Were you inspired by the words and the meaning of Paulo Coelho when he speaks about the gold, when you created and begin understanding the gold within the mentoring and coaching relationship?
I'm sure I must have been on some level, although confession, it was such a long time between me reading that book and me actually doing any coaching or mentoring. So, but I'm sure somewhere in my unconscious I absolutely was, because you're right, I had actually forgotten they talk about that in that book. But yes, they do. And here I am sharing that word. So I must have absolutely been.
Yeah, well, maybe Paulo Coelho caught you speaking somewhere, Lindsey, and adopted the great idea about the gold from you. But I think it's really interesting. Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting because in that book, the main character goes on this big journey trying to find the gold that was within him the whole time. And so I can appreciate that finding that gold can in itself be a really challenging process. So whether you're looking for a mentor, a coach, and when you're negotiating outcomes, how to actually find the gold can be a really challenging process. Even identifying what is the gold that you're looking for. And one of the things you spoke about was the qualities of people. So, for example, if you're looking for a mentor, looking at their skill sets, you were saying that the skill set that you want to develop can be seen as gold. How can you identify what your gold is that you're looking for or that you need to develop?
Often as humans, we have a story around the thing that we want or don't want. And more often than not, believe it or not, we know what we don't want, but we don't necessarily know what we do want in life. And so that's actually where a coach can help you. I'm sure there are a myriad of other things that you could do to get that information to it. A coach specifically can help you with that, because if you're looking to achieve a certain thing, but but it could be a push away instead of a go towards. It's something that you want to avoid in your life. Perhaps you're looking to, for example, achieve a certain milestone at the gym, but you're pushing away. You're not wanting to go there in the mornings and you're not sure why. That's where a coach can really help you, because the goal's in there. You know deep down on one level why you don't want to go. And I guarantee you, because I have this experience, it's not the cold mornings here in Melbourne. It's freezing and it's very hard to get up when it's dark and cold and go to the gym. But it won't be that. There'll be something else that's deterring you. And it's normally about the third thing down in terms of the layers in your mind, the chunks in your mind, the way that you get there. A coach can help you with that, absolutely. Sometimes we need to get out of our own way to be able to find that information. Coaching is a skill set, and self-coaching is something that can be quite challenging to do to get to that information. Even myself, as someone who's been coaching for 13 years, it can still be very difficult when you hit something called a boundary condition, which is in essence the edge of what you know. So you're asking yourself a coaching question and you're saying, coming up with the same story over and over again, or I don't know what the answer is. I've got no clue. Having someone else support you to push through that boundary condition and make the unknown known for you can be incredibly valuable.
Yeah, and so asking the right questions can often be a powerful way of then finding the answer. Can you share some of the really powerful questions you think can help people that are coaching type questions when they're looking for their goal and overcoming obstacles?
More than specific questions, I think some structures of questions can be incredibly useful, and then you can tailor that with the flexibility you need to get those answers. So to begin with, avoid questions that are why focused on this level, if you've not done coaching yourself before, because they can come across unconsciously and subconsciously as a form of judgment. And, you only have access to so much of your conscious mind or so much of your mind and your awareness at any one time. So if your unconscious mind is pushing back on you because you're asking a question that makes you internally feel uncomfortable or judged or perhaps unworthy to choose something completely different, but very regular, very popular experience for people, you're not going to be able to push through that boundary condition. That question is not necessarily going to support you to get to the gold. Questions that start with what or include the hows and a big picture can be really supportive in terms of helping you understand where you're at with things. Because your knee-jerk reaction, so your instinct, your first few thoughts that you have before you stop and perhaps edit them, which is something we all do as humans, can really be quite insightful and self-coaching too. So to avoid those why sort of questions and stick to the what's and the hows when you're just learning how to ask yourself those sorts of powerful questions.
Yeah, so that's really powerful, and it's I think it comes across different to the famous TED Talk of Simon Sinek, who says, start with why.
Yes.
It seems different, but I think that the rationale, if you look deeper, is actually quite similar, because I think also what you're saying is that if you ask why type questions, it can dig a hole for yourself that you become very cemented into.
Yes.
And you want to be able to overcome roadblocks, and what the why questions can actually dig deeper roadblocks if you're not aware about where you're getting stuck.
Yes, absolutely. And I love Simon Sinek and what he does, and he's got so much value and so many fantastic leadership techniques that he shares. However, I've seen in relation to his golden circle, I've seen so many people in leadership or entrepreneurs or just people in general who are feeling a little off kilter in their world not start anything or do anything because they're waiting to find out what their why is. And then suddenly all this time goes past and they, on the other side of it, almost always feel some sort of regret that they didn't just start somewhere and give it a go and learn on the fly. And so it absolutely has its place, 100%. It's a powerful tool. However, it's a tool that needs to be used incredibly wisely, because with great power comes great responsibility. And sometimes we're not aware of that when we're the everyman using that tool.
We're quoting some amazing people in this podcast. The great power, great responsibility reminds me of Spider-Man.
It does.
Yeah, fantastic one. Yeah. But I also appreciate this point about just starting and going with it and not getting bogged down in this why. Because I can remember many times speaking with people who, for example, might be negotiating with themselves, trying to find what is their purpose. What should they be doing on a day-to-day basis? Or what is the purpose that they're trying to achieve in a particular situation? And looking for that why can get people lost in that process. And exactly like you say, Lindsey, sometimes through beginning that process and going deeper into that journey, then the true beauty, the treasure of the journey itself, the clarity of the outcome that you're working towards gets so much clearer as you take one step after the other on that journey, right?
Absolutely. And I know there's two types of people in the world. Those who like to have the big picture that they're aiming for typically tend to prefer the why sort of questions, and those who just want the next step. There's so much value in what you said, in just taking the next step, just knowing what the next step is, because if you try and plan out this big picture, you're going to judge the today version of you is going to judge the rest of your life. And you could learn something in the next minute or the next hour or the next 24 hours, which could change the course of your life forever for the better. If you have that big picture and a set to it, you may let it slip on by because those unconscious filters you have there that don't allow you to process information or large quantities of information can prevent you from taking that on board and feeling it for what it really is and then actioning it too. So there's a lot of gold in that 1 mile at a time type of view of the world and way of being.
I think it's probably likely that at least some people listening to us right now would have been on this kind of journey and then experienced imposter syndrome coming up. Do you have any coaching strategies for helping people overcome imposter syndrome?
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
Syndrome is
awesome.
A massive one. It's so big for everyone. So according to the Imposter Syndrome Institute, because there's such a big thing that it requires an institute, the research says 100% of people in their lifetime will experience imposter syndrome in one way, shape or form. And then there's so many different types of imposter syndrome in ways that you don't necessarily know. But to break it down for people, imposter syndrome is a very niche form, generally speaking, of anxiousness. So if you experience imposter syndrome, it doesn't mean that you have anxiety. Anxiousness is a normal thing that we all feel from time to time. And imposter syndrome is a niche form of that. It's always the fear anxiousness is always the fear in one way, shape, or form, that what the future is going to throw at us is more than we're able to handle. And imposter syndrome is just one way that can pop up in our minds and show itself and show those symptoms to us. I used to get a lot of anxiousness and actual anxiety. When I was growing up, I had proper panic attacks and anxiety and the full-blown thing as a child and a teenager. And when I stopped to really reflect on what I needed to be able to move through that, there was so much imposter syndrome in that, because it's like, what makes you think that you're able to or deserve the right to lead a life that it looks like everybody else is leading? Everyone, seems to, it's like when you're looking at social media, you just see the best parts of people, generally speaking, and that's what it feels like often from when you're experiencing imposter syndrome, and you can feel like a fraud as well for a multitude of reasons. I found the best strategies were the ones that supported you to accept the way that you're feeling, understand the way that you're feeling, and then choose something else. When we really believe that our emotions are us, as opposed to we are humans who have emotions, we allow these things to rule us instead of being able to look at it through the lens of, well, that's what I'm experiencing in this moment. And that's okay. I can feel all feelings are valid. Everything is absolutely on the table, and it's okay to have whatever feelings you're having. It's what you do about it is always the thing. And if you're allowing your feelings of imposter syndrome and that dread or that feeling of being a fraud or that feeling of being discovered as someone who's not in alignment with the person they say they are, if you're allowing that to run your life, then you're in essence allowing an emotion to live your life for you. And I think you deserve better than that. So just being aware of this is incredibly powerful, and then choosing something else.
That's awesome. And so the piece about acceptance that you spoke about, I think, is powerful, because sometimes the further and harder we try to push something away, the stronger it comes back. But also I like the way that you speak about imposter syndrome as being an emotion, because if we can accept imposter syndrome as being how you're feeling, not who you are, then it's a great pathway to be able to separate ourselves from that feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's normal. It's a very normal thing to experience. It's okay.
So what if there's someone out there that they, for example, are negotiating something that's really important for them, their family, their community, and they're really feeling like they have to punch well and truly above their weight? They're feeling this great sense of imposter syndrome as they go to meetings, as they have discussions, as they negotiate through the process. What sort of questions can these people ask themselves that are really empowering in terms of overcoming these feelings of imposter syndrome?
There are quite a few, but in terms of that particular example, the first thing I would be recommending is challenging your assumptions. Are you really punching above your weight, or is that just what you've assumed? Perhaps they're coming to this meeting feeling exactly the same way you are and thinking the same thing about you. So never assume, always know for sure. And if you're basing these things on just what you're assuming to be true about your external environment, then challenge that. Because perhaps it's not, because unless you know for certain, because they've told you that you're batting above your weight, then, and who's going to tell you that? That's not, no one thinks about other people that way. Very, very rarely. Most of the time we're thinking about ourselves. And if you're experiencing imposter syndrome, you are thinking about yourself, and that's okay. So stepping out of that and thinking about the other person and how you can show up for them will be a nice, quick way to get rid of it as well.
And I wonder whether humility is a pathway of overcoming imposter syndrome, because by being humble through that process, I wonder if that then can also be a way of overcoming the feelings of being an imposter.
I imagine that could be very useful for some people, absolutely. However, we tend to see ourselves through a very specific lens, and it's very rarely accurate. So if we're feeling like we don't necessarily have the skills or the attributes to be able to have this negotiation, I would be questioning first and foremost for the majority of people, because some will be absolutely, humility will be useful, but questioning first and foremost what they're basing this on. Because I guarantee a lot of the time it won't actually be the reality, because there's my perspective, your perspective, and then the truth is somewhere in the middle. So if that's the case and you are feeling like you don't have the skills, it is absolutely okay to say, do you know what? Can we revisit this? It's at whatever point in time. Or, do you know what? I'm not actually sure at the moment, but I'll come back to you at this point. Is there anything else you need from me now? Giving yourself permission to not have all the answers, which is slightly different for some people. For some people, it is not. It depends on their behavior, adaptability, their ability to be behaviorally flexible, and also their natural tendencies and values and things. But giving yourself permission to say, I don't have all the answers right now. We as humans think that we have to answer a question just because it's been given to us, but we actually don't. We don't have to answer any question we don't want to in any way, shape, or form, and that includes negotiating.
Yeah, and I do really appreciate the point you say about choosing what we want to be answering, choosing the way that we want to be operating, and also testing the assumptions in that process that you speak about. I think that can be really powerful. It's an amazing way to look at it, because often, as you say, where the assumptions are wrong, then that gives us the freedom to be able to test and find a better serving solution by questioning the assumptions. So that's a really powerful method and tool that people can use. Where do you see the place of leadership and understanding the purpose when it comes to negotiations?
Leadership is something, particularly in organizations, that we look at from 3 different levels, and it doesn't matter if you're looking at it within an organization or for your personal life. It applies very similarly. Leadership always starts with self. If you're not able to lead self, you'll not be able to lead others in a way that you will be proud of. There's different degrees of that, of course, absolutely. So in terms of negotiating, in terms of anything, leadership must start with self. And through all the strategies we've spoken about so far and many, many others, you can learn to best lead yourself. And through that, you'll be able to inspire others to be led by you. And then leading an organization could be the same as leading a community or leading a group or leading anything along those lines as well. It's about a external vision that people get on board with. And that's a really powerful thing too. But even the biggest and best visionaries always start with the ability to lead self. And if you can do that in those moments of negotiation, like for example, what we were just talking about, if you can lead self, you can adapt and you can be flexible and you can achieve an outcome that you're happy with at the end of the conversation, even if it's not the one that you were aiming to have as a result of the negotiation.
Yeah, and what needs to be on your mind to be able to lead yourself brilliantly?
It's in my perspective, it starts with self-awareness. Always starts with self-awareness. And that's a big overarching term that includes things like emotional intelligence and critical thinking and problem solving. That I think I said this at the beginning, the person with the most behavioral flexibility is always the one who has the most success, because they can ebb and they can flow, and to be depending on what their environment needs and what is required of them. And that all starts with self-awareness, because to be able to do that, you have to understand where you are in any given environment, both emotionally and your physiology and everything that you bring to a conversation and your communication, which is, largely your tone and your body language and those aspects too. If you have a look at and continue to research self-awareness and what's that's made up of, that'll be an incredible place to start.
Self-awareness is such a broad understanding. It's even hard to put into a box. Is it a concept? Is it an understanding? It's really hard to say exactly what is self-awareness. Who are you really? Where do you come from? There's so many questions about self that we actually take for granted, that if you actually dig down deep into those kinds of questions, they can actually become quite scary, confronting. And I think sometimes people don't want to go there because of what it can reveal. But in the journey of understanding self, I can really appreciate what you're saying too, Lindsey, how it gives you that sense of understanding and then the ability to lead others. Something I was thinking about recently is, in the world, we're consistently coming up against different personalities. And which one of those personalities is going to have the most influence in a particular outcome in a negotiation. And like you've just said, it's probably that personality that is most congruent, really understanding, highly aligned with who they really are and the purpose flowing from there.
Yeah, and just to sort of add another layer to self-awareness, labeling yourself and understanding where you came from and who you are is actually not part of it in any way, shape, or form. It's self-discovery, absolutely. Self-awareness is pure acceptance of where you are in the world at this point in time and what's required of you and the skills that is required of you to be able to adapt and be flexible to achieve the outcome you're looking to achieve with this particular, whatever the negotiation is in front of you. Could be negotiating with your kids to eat their vegetables. Your self-awareness, understanding what they need from you in that moment and where you are and what the gap is and closing that is self-awareness. It's actually not about understanding or labeling, I should say. It's not about labeling who you are and where you've been through, because that is actually a closing thing and self-awareness is an opening thing, and that's what we're looking to achieve with it.
As you open self, does that mean that there's no boundary to self?
It's a very philosophical question. As someone who spends a lot of time looking at philosophy, we could get into a whole existential crisis there. Yes and no, I suppose. Opening self, from my perspective, in context of this particular conversation, is purely being open-minded and above the line to the possibilities at hand, and having that outcome with the negotiation forefront. And what do I need to be and who do I need to, what do I need to do and who do I need to be in this particular moment to achieve that? And in that essence, it's opening instead of going down into alignment, because you are always in alignment. It's actually impossible to be out of alignment. And if you're feeling out of alignment, then perhaps you're experiencing some form of anxiousness, or perhaps you're experiencing something else or a thought pattern even that is unconsciously making you feel out of alignment, because it is impossible to be out of alignment. It's important to know that. So if you are feeling that, it's just a symptom of something as simple as something that you're telling yourself on a regular basis without even being consciously aware of it. You get rid of that, you suddenly feel in alignment. It's very interesting how it works.
Yeah, and I feel like maybe part of what you're saying as well is feeling non-aligned can closely relate to non-acceptance. And if we're not accepting, then we're blocking what is. We can be blocking that gold. And so sometimes it's about embracing and saying, yes, I think there was even a movie with Jim Carrey, a comedy movie, where he'd say yes to everything. I think it was called Yes Man from memory here. And going on this amazing journey that is life. We're not saying say yes to everything, but yeah, I think that the point you're saying about, being accepting is powerful and not blocking the gift that life presents as part of leadership through purpose.
Absolutely.
Lindsey, we have had an amazing yarn here today, and I think that our listeners have got a ton out of what you've shared. I was wondering if there's anything else you'd like to leave us with.
Something I leave at the end of almost any session or podcast or anything I'm part of is always the same message, and that's be the person who would inspire you. Be that person, because you can do that at any point in time. Choose to be your own inspiration. You can absolutely draw this from other people, but at the end of the day, if you've led a life where you are inspiring yourself, you've led a life you're happy with. I've looked into the research and it's absolutely there, and it's a philosophy which is very useful and very empowering too. So be that person.
That's amazing, and I appreciate the depth and wisdom that you've shared with us today, Lindsey. You've done so well in terms of answering such broad questions but giving practical use. And if people want to get in touch with you, can they reach out to you on LinkedIn and social media and the like?
Yes, absolutely. LinkedIn, Lindsey Leigh Hobson. I'm there, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Matthew. It's been an incredible experience.
Yeah, awesome. Hope you have enjoyed this one, everybody. I think this has been a great podcast with Lindsey. Lindsey, keep up all this amazing coaching work that you do, leadership, and I think that you're fantastic. So thank you for being on Rolling Through Negotiations podcast. Remember, guys, if you like this episode, share it with your friends, press that like button, subscribe to Rolling Through Negotiations so we can keep on bringing you more great episodes just like this one. Us.